Welcome to Sit and Stay, the podcast that breaks down the challenges of starting and maintaining a mental health practice into digestible chapters. Sit and Stay is presented by RipsyTech, an electronic health record company committed to addressing the mental health crisis in the United States.
Hello, and welcome back to the Sit and Stay podcast brought to you by RipsyTech. I'm RipsyTech Product Manager Parker Anderson, and as always, I'm joined by founder and CEO of RipsyTech, Tom Tarshis. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Parker. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, Tom. So today we have a special guest joining us to talk about a topic that's very essential for any healthcare provider, and that is data security. So to join in this discussion, we're thrilled to welcome Farokh Herfat, Head of Channel Partnerships at Twingate. Hi, Farokh.
Hi, guys. Hi, Parker. Hi, Tom. Nice to see you again, and thanks for having me on board.
Of course. So to get a little background, to introduce Farokh to the audience, and some background on Twingate as well. So Twingate is a modern zero trust network access solution that replaces traditional VPNs. It helps organizations, including healthcare providers, our main customers, securely connect to their internal systems without exposing their networks to unnecessary risks. So as I mentioned, at RipsyTech, all of our customers are using Twingate to securely access their EHR. And we wanted to bring Farokh onto the show to help explain why that's important and a little bit about Farokh. He started his career in enterprise IT at Anthem and Object-J. Then he co-founded a travel tech startup called Canadian Travel, which is pretty cool. He went on to hold multiple roles at Informatica, where he helped close one of the company's biggest licensing deals. And then he spent a few years traveling, volunteering across Asia and Africa. Then he joined CrowdStrike, leading global partnerships with managed security service providers, MSSPs, and software vendors. So today he's the head of channel partnerships at Twingate, helping organizations adopt very secure, very modern infrastructure, and we're very excited to have him with us. Farokh, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Very cool. Yeah, and so, for I'm a software engineer, child psychiatrist, but I, for people who aren't, into IT security and the hardcore, it's a whole different field within the software engineering. So it's not an area that I'm, an expert in at all. But one thing that myself and our CTO are very keyed into is the importance of keeping our patient database secure. And I think that as we've launched, we wanted to get a product that really gave us top-notch security and an extra line of defense, and at the same time was very, very straightforward to implement and use. And we've been very happy with Twingate and bringing it in. And it's great to have Farokh on. But Farokh, maybe you could tell a little bit more to the audience around, what is important with current day security. Why did Twingate start up as a company? And what is the differentiator in the Twingate Zero Trust network versus a different VPN service? Lots of stuff there, but yeah, pick any of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, let's start with the way we work today, right? We don't work in an office anymore every day, all day, that has a locked door, right? Often we're working at home, at a coffee shop, where your practitioners are going from their office to a clinic to a hospital. They're using their phone between appointments, and so working remotely, working in a mobile fashion is just reality nowadays, right? And that flexibility is great, right? We all want it. We all want flexibility. We all want to do what we want to do from wherever we want to do it. But the unfortunate reality is that if not done right, that flexibility can open the door to hackers, right? So like that's something that we've seen, and I think everybody has seen these news stories about large organizations, even in the healthcare space, being breached. And so then the question becomes like, how does this happen, right? Where are we vulnerable? Like, why is that happening? And, kind of, I'm going to set the stage first in terms of what's happening, why we're seeing what we're seeing in the first place out in the wild, and then kind of help the audience understand, well, where does Twingate fit in, and how was Twingate designed from the ground up to help people work remotely and work securely, right? And then protect them from common vulnerabilities that we see out there. So what are those vulnerabilities that we see, right? We have, first and foremost, I think most people are familiar with phishing emails or phishing attacks, right? So you get an email, you open it up, you're like, wait, this is really legit. Like maybe from the place I bank, or a person that I know or I do business with, or a patient, right? And oftentimes, like it asks you to click on something, right? And then once you click on something, again, you get the same website that you get when you log on to your bank. And you're like, okay, I guess I gotta enter my information, my username, password. And you do that. On the other side, there's a hacker who just got your credentials, your username and password, and now they're going to use that to get everything they can from you, including your financial information, maybe even your, patient information. Which brings me to the next vulnerability that we see a lot of is password reuse, right? And I'm guilty of this too, right? Where just because like sometimes you have to just log in and then sign up for so many different things nowadays, right? So to make it easy, I use a password, in some cases that I've used before in other, websites. And then, I kind of cross my fingers. I'm like, well, I hope this site never gets hacked, because if this site gets hacked, then I have a password they can use for like all the other websites that I use, right? So it's called password reuse. That's another thing that commonly happens. Right. And then, I mentioned like public working remotely. Well, again, something that I'm not proud to say, but I've done it from time to time out of necessity. I'm at a coffee shop. I really need to like get on the internet on my laptop, and I bring up the coffee shop Wi-Fi and it says free Wi-Fi, click here. And I click there, and I don't know if this Wi-Fi is secure or not, right? If it's not secure, then somebody could very well would just be sitting there and, spying on everything that I'm doing, right? And these are just like everyday examples that we get hit with. So then we look at, all right, Twingate. How does Twingate fit into this equation? Where did it start, and what did our founders, what did they want to do when they first started this company to help people, to help them make be more secure, but also to do their best work from anywhere, right? And so what was there and what is still there instead of Twingate were VPNs. And I think most people are familiar with VPNs, right? They've been a go-to solution for many years. And VPNs, they allow you to log into a VPN and then basically access stuff that you need for work. The problem with a VPN inherently is that kind of think of it as like giving the master key to the entire hospital, right? Like you work at a hospital, you give somebody the master key, and then that person can go into every single office, every single OR, everywhere, right? Where they should not, go. Maybe they have a right, to go to one place. They can go everywhere, right? So that's been the issue for VPNs. Basically, when you use a VPN and you get access to what you want to access, you have access to everything, right? The second thing is they're very clunky. They slow things down. It's like a reality of using VPNs. Where like I'll be on a Zoom call or a Google Meets call, whatever it is, and all of a sudden my connection drops, right? Or I really have to like access something, but I have to go through multiple steps to log in. I have to first say, hey, like I want to get into, like, let's say I work for a big company or a hospital chain. Hey, I need to go to the Georgia region, and in the Georgia region I need to go to the Atlanta region, and the Atlanta region I need to enter this password, and then it's just a whole thing, right? So that's really been some of the headaches that people have been facing. So our founders looked at this space and said, hey, like how do we allow people to do their best work from anywhere, but do it in the most secure way, but in a way that doesn't slow them down, right? And that's how Twingate was founded. And how do we do that in a way to basically help solve for all the problems that people are facing from VPNs, which is really just like yesterday's tech, right? And that was like the initial inspiration behind Twingate. And I hope that kind of set the stage or the context for the conversation here.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm, a lot of our clinicians who work at big groups or hospital settings like Kaiser, Sutter, any big academic system, they do tend to have like a VPN login in order to get into the records. It's always fraught with difficulties and with the lag that you mentioned. So some of our other users, and it's interesting for HIPAA, right? A name and password is enough. Like you don't even need two-factor authentication on your personal login to be HIPAA compliant. But yeah, so, and then I think there's sort of two pieces also to the security piece. And one is that you can require like an authenticator app or make this sort of password reuse thing more secure, but that doesn't really do anything to the database that's stored in the cloud to make that piece more secure. And I think a zero trust network actually helps with both the front end and back end. And we're worried about people losing their passwords, but we're actually more worried about some hacker getting access to the whole database. And I think that's something that a lot of clinicians or people who are maybe not super tech savvy think, oh, well, I get a text message, so I know the data is very secure. And well, no, that helps you not someone get your password to log in, but that does nothing to the actual protect the database from random hacker attacks.
Exactly. And that's really the crux of zero trust, right? If you look at zero trust, what does it mean? It isn't just a buzzword. It's really just common sense. It's like, don't trust anyone or anything until you prove that they're legitimate. And you do that every single time. It's not a one-time thing, right? And again, like going back to the analogy of a hospital, it's like basically, if you don't have zero trust, it's kind of like walking into a hospital that has no lobby. It doesn't have a place for you to sign in. You literally just kind of walk in and you're like, all right, I'm just gonna go to this room, that room. Last time I was at the hospital, like I had to check in. I had to say like who I'm here to see. I had to show, they would ask me, are you next of kin? Like why do you want to go see them, right? Who are you, right? So I had to verify my identity and how I know this person, right? And then I couldn't just go anywhere, right? If I try to like just roam around the hallways, there were certain parts of the hospital I couldn't go to, right? So that's really like the importance of having a zero trust from IT perspective and a technology perspective. Anytime one of your healthcare practitioners, psychiatrists use Twingate to access your EHR system, right? Twingate does a lot of cool things in the back end to make sure that's done securely. First, we check, hey, who are you? Are you who you say you are? We verify that person's identity, right? Hey, are you logging in from a trusted device, right? Like there's times where maybe I'm hanging out with my teenage nephew and I may want to use his laptop, which God knows what's on there, right? Like malware or whatever, right? But like, I can't just access the stuff that I need for work from his laptop because it's not a trusted device, doesn't have Twingate on it, right? That's a really good thing. Is that hackers could just be sitting there waiting for me to access. If I was a healthcare practitioner to access my EHR, like, great, let me go in now, right? So are you who you say you are? Are you logging in from a trusted device? And then what are you accessing? Are you accessing what you're supposed to be accessing? Or are you accessing something you're not? Like, if I'm a medical professional working at Kaiser, right, I should not be accessing their IT team's environments, right? That's the IT team. I'm a medical practitioner. I have no business getting access to their stuff, right? And
Right.
Unfortunately, we see some of the high profile hacks, if you will. That's how they start, right? Somebody gets, someone's credentials, username and password, they get in, but because they don't have a zero trust framework in place, that person can now just go log everything down across all different departments, right? And that's really why it's so important. Now, in healthcare and in mental health, it's even more important. Why? Because you're dealing with deeply personal, sensitive information, right? These are your patient's information. It's very sensitive. It's very personal to them. You also have HIPAA. I don't need to tell you the importance of HIPAA and how bad it is and how much you get penalized if you violate HIPAA. And obviously, like the trust that your patients have, like your patients trust you to be discreet, to keep their information confidential. And like, unfortunately, sometimes all that it takes is like someone logging in from an unprotected laptop. In this case, that doesn't have Twingate, or sharing their password with someone, and Twingate is not verifying their identity. And then boom, all of a sudden that hacker gets in, and then they get all this information, they sell it on the dark web, and that practice is in a lot of trouble, and their patients feel compromised.
Yeah, it's and I was mentioning before we started recording that maybe 15 years ago, our old EHR company, there was a data breach, and records weren't lost, but all of our patients' demographics and then some other personal information, which is name and birth date, that's HIPAA data. And it was a powerless situation with the EHR company who sort of said, well, these things happen, it's not our fault, which was not very accurate or fair. And then here's your credit monitoring service, which is actually sort of a scam for the credit monitoring services just to get new customers, and that's a whole other podcast topic. But I think especially in healthcare, our duty to protect the data above and beyond what the HIPAA requirements. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how AI is infiltrating now the world of healthcare, especially. And so now there is, likely, if you're using AI currently, there's recordings of sessions, there could be transcripts, there's like an extra level of personal detail that, whether it's kept temporarily or kept forever, it's another reason to really make sure you have top-notch security to prevent those outside attacks. And right. And Farokh, we know, once people get personal information, there's lots of things that they can do with it. In your experience, I know people can try to extort others, but open fake accounts. There's even people impersonating other people's health insurance cards if they get your health insurance information. Are there other things that you've come across?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been on both sides of the equation. I've been in the position where I am now, where I'm trying to educate people on the importance of cybersecurity and using the right solutions to protect themselves and their businesses. But I've also been a victim, right? And I know how incredibly difficult it is to have to rebuild and have to get your business back up and running. So it's really important to kind of look at, like we talked about, the common types of vulnerabilities, the common type of what we call, entry points, the phishing emails, right? The reusing of passwords across multiple sites, using unsafe or insecure Wi-Fi, right? So those are all like kind of how it all starts, right? But what I've seen, it really runs the gamut in terms of like how adversaries today, threat actors today, they leverage the latest and greatest, right? It's not like before, where you really had to know the technology, the hacking technology, to go out there and hack businesses, right? You can outsource it. Any person that has access to the dark web can go out there in one of these chat rooms and say, hey, like, I want to go and try to infiltrate and breach 1,000 medical practices. Give me a list of 1,000 medical practices that I can go and what like, how should I do it? And essentially, like, it's called ransomware as a service. You can basically like outsource it, and then you can either like contract somebody to do it for you, or you can actually like get the right tools and try to do it yourself, right? And that's how prolific it's gotten. Now, unfortunately, the way it works is that what these bad folks do is imagine like they're walking down the street, okay, and they're like, hey, does this door have a lock? Does this house have a door that has a lock on it? Yeah, well, let me go to the next one. Oh, wait, the next one doesn't have a lock on it. Great, let me go to this one. They'll take everything they want, then they go to the next house. Does it have a lock? Let me try my luck with the next one, right? So like a lot of times they don't waste time, breaking into a company that already has the proper security solutions in place, like a Twingate. They're like, nah, let me not wait. It's gonna take some time. It could, I don't want to bang my head against the wall because it's too hard to break into. They have a bunch of different solutions in place to, protect their business. Let me go down the street and see if there's one that doesn't have anything, right? And so that's often what happens. Now, unfortunately, again, because most large organizations have the resources to put the right solutions in place, and they can hire a security team and all that good stuff, right? They're better protected. And that's why we see these hackers basically targeting small, mid-sized businesses a lot more than the larger organizations. I mean, they both get targeted, but what people don't see on the news is like the hundreds or thousands of like small, mid-sized businesses that get hacked on a regular basis. Like I don't know what the stats are, every week, every month, but it just happens way, 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 way too much, right? And it's just increasing. AI plays a role in it too, right? Because now they can use AI to do what they do faster. They can automate all the manual steps that they had to do before with AI, right? So that's why, and it's not, this isn't me trying to like scare people into it. The reality is that they're doing it. But the other reality is that if you take the basic safeguards, like you mentioned before, right? Two-factor authentication, securing access to things that need to be secure, like your EHR that has sensitive patient data, not clicking on phishing links, right? If you just take those basic steps, precautions, then the bad guys are going to be like, I don't want to mess with this. I'm just going to go to someone who's not doing any of this. And there's a lot of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, go ahead, Parker.
I was going to ask, one of the questions that we have prepared on the list, I think of myself as, I've been using Twingate for, I think, multiple years now. And I remember we were using a VPN solution before. And the first time I set up Twingate and I got my access, it was like, oh, it's done. Oh, okay. That was it. Awesome. Sweet. And it was super easy to use. And, I've loved continuing to use it for the last 2 years, just because it's like something I don't even have to think about. It's like, I do it and then I authenticate and I'm done. So with the system being super secure, but also really easy to use, how do you kind of strike the balance between keeping it secure and easy to use?
That's great.
Or even to be a little like, most other EHRs don't have some extra for sort of smaller groups that don't non-big hospital setting. There's no extra step, right? So people have, our users are signing up. They're not used to an extra security step, and even one that's like that. Yeah, Parker I think had recorded like 20-minute videos on the old VPN solution we had. This is like sign in with multiple providers to verify, right? But we still do get pushback on why do we have to, it's an extra 3-click, whatever it is. So just a different way to phrase like balancing the user convenience with security. How do you talk about that?
Great question. And it's not just a nice to have, it's crucial, right? And I'm going to give a shout out to our CEO and founder, Tony. Like he always says this, like, hey, security tools are only good if people use them, and they'll only use it if you make it simple to use, right? And so it's like basically when he and our other co-founder sat down and designed this tool, they said like, let's try to make it as easy as possible to use, both from a user perspective, but also from the folks who actually like need to configure it and deploy it and all that good stuff. And we get a lot of like love letters from people who sign up and they're like, this was so much easier, kind of like what you said, Parker, so much easier than anything else I've ever used, right? So you have to take the friction out of the process. That was one of our core tenets from the very beginning of building this company, is like, we want to take the friction out of the process of getting secure access to the stuff you need for work, right? And make it super, super possible. Now, look, is it a matter of just me thinking, hey, secure access, and it happens? No, you have to click on something, or it has to be on, or sometimes when you reboot your laptop, you have to like re-authenticate. And those are
Right.
all important safety measures, right? There are sometimes some extra steps to take, but that's crucial because you have to basically re-authenticate from time to time, right? Like edge case scenario, but what happens if your laptop is stolen, right? And it was just sitting there in a cafe and somebody just took it while it's open and they're right there, right? So we need to like reset the two-factor from time to time and make sure like in that crazy edge case scenario that doesn't happen, kind of thing, right? So yes, maybe it's an extra step, but it's a lot better than the many steps that people had to take before, which weren't even as good as what you're getting right now. And again, like it wasn't an afterthought for us at Twingate. It was really from the very beginning when the founders sat down to think about, hey, how do we want to basically rebuild or build something from scratch to help people with this problem? One of the first things that came to their mind was like, make it simple. Because if it's simple, they'll use it. If it's not simple, they won't use it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and once we right, yeah, so we kind of and we just recorded like basic steps to get started, and it's like here you need Twingate, right? So you do have to do a download, and then you do have to authenticate. And we've had people with very old computers or outdated operating systems, which is also a risk. So people shouldn't need to update that. And so that's been not recently actually, but there had been some sort of occasionally there's a grumbling if someone doesn't have a system that can actually run Twingate, et cetera, and we have to have a conversation about getting updating that technology piece. But so we're how, and we've talked a lot about some of the, without even talking about how easy it is to configure from our back end to keep our side secure. What else is the other? We're always looking for the tidbits to tell our clients, like do the download and authenticate, because the security is far, if your patient data is lost, like that's something that's much worse than the hassle of doing the download and a couple of clicks, which isn't even really a hassle. But what else could you add to our user base around the importance of security?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it's not just a Twingate thing, but even at CrowdStrike and other places. Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you have like an older version of Windows, for example, whether it was CrowdStrike or here at Twingate, it's really a security reason why we don't support those older versions, because those versions are not even supported by Microsoft, right?
Right.
And so Microsoft isn't actually like issuing any security patches, and that's one of the first things that hackers go for, like outdated Windows, no security patches. Oh, it doesn't have Twingate or anything else on it. Let's go, jackpot, we're in. So that's really like one of the implicit reasons why we're like, hey, you gotta have at least a version that's like supported by Windows, and the newer the better, because it has the latest security patches from Microsoft or whatever operating system you're using, right? So that's the reason behind the scenes why that's the case. But in terms of for folks who are not in the cybersecurity space or in the technology space, understanding why this all matters, why data security matters, especially in the healthcare space. I alluded to this before. You're caring for patients. These are people's, lives, their mental health. And very appropriate time. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, right? So it's congratulations to everyone and thank you to everyone, to your audience for what they're doing. They're doing amazing work, right, to keep people healthy, mentally healthy. But these are real life human beings you're caring for, right? And so their trust really extends beyond just your therapy room, right? It extends to their personal records, their history, their identity, right? And if a person is sitting there and they're having a conversation with a therapist, and that information is something that's very sensitive, they only want to share with that therapist, but somehow now it's leaked out, on the web to everyone, that would be devastating for some people, right? It's very devastating. So you don't want that to happen to your patients. And like I mentioned before, data breaches, data, hacks are not just a big company problem. They're actually more of a small company problem, because the bad guys are actually targeting the smaller companies because they know they're often not secure and they're easier to get into, right? So that's another reason why it's like we can't just say, well, I just have a small practice. These guys are probably going for the big hospital chains or the big companies because they have a lot of money. They won't come after me. No, they'll come after you. Unfortunately, I hate to say, they'll come after you too because they feel like you're easier targets. And the last thing I'll say is, it's often it's just like one mistake, right? Like I used the wrong laptop, it wasn't secure, and I accessed my EHR, or I gave my password to someone, and then they got in, and they didn't verify who they really were. And then it's just all it takes is that one mistake, and then you're reeling from the consequences, legal consequences, financial consequences, personal consequences, upset patients. Like the ramifications go really far, right? And that's why it's really important. And it's really, please, I don't want your audience to think this as like, a scare tactic, like, oh, you should be scared if you don't use Twingate. It's not really not that, because again, I've been on the other side of it's happened to me too. Like it's real, and I don't wish it on anyone. And so I really hope that, your audience, they're doing such wonderful work, amazing work, important work, right? And I hate to see that ever be tarnished because of, one simple mistake or not using the proper tooling, even if that tooling requires one extra click or step or having a newer laptop, right? But it's so worth it for your sake, for your business sake, and for your patient's sake.
Yeah, very well said. Is it a fair statement, Farokh, to say, like, if you're able to access your EHR from anywhere with just your username and password, that system is not going to be as secure as well, certainly not with Twingate, but like if that's all you're doing to get in, and you can do it from any unsecured Wi-Fi network at any coffee shop, which we know a lot of practitioners do, you're not hitting a security level that is going to be, I don't want to say like standard, but if you really care about protecting that confidential data, and you're not doing any sort of extra authentication, zero trust network, and it's just username, password, you're not at the level that maybe you should be comfortable with.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're just using a regular username and password, think of it as having a padlock on your front door, right? I mean, you just take a crowbar and you just pop that, and you're in. Like using Twingate, you have the most robust, locking mechanism and cameras, and basically like you've fortified, yourself against these types of potential issues. And so it's really important. And yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, hey, I can just enter my username and password, it should be good, right? But again, when it comes to confidential patient information, HIPAA compliant information, the ramifications we talked about, it's so important to take that extra step to make sure that you are safeguarding yourself from these bad things happening.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I kind of think of it as like, hygiene for your digital life. Like you don't have to, but you're going to be really happy that you did.
Absolutely. It's like one of those things, like you do it and you like, but if you're not doing it and something bad happens, you're like, why didn't I do that?
Right.
Yeah. Well, why should I floss? Oh, now
yeah, exactly.
Fell out. Oh, I wish I had done it. Yeah.
Should have done it. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for this overview. I think it will be super helpful for our clients to listen to this and hopefully understand more about the security level we want, and the Twingate product, and why we're so happy with it, and require it to use our software. But Parker, any last thoughts, questions, comments you have for Farokh?
No, not too many. Just I want to say thank you, and I thought this was incredibly useful. I think you pointed out a lot of very relatable situations. I think the first time I ever sat down at a coffee shop in San Francisco back in 2018, I got hacked immediately. So yeah, very relatable situation. Like, that is real, and it happens to the best of us. And that, I think I want to send this episode to my wife as well. I've been trying to encourage her to get a new laptop. That's not an open invitation to look into my wife's laptop, but she'll be getting a new one soon. But now it's like, hey, I can tell her, hey, this guy had channel partnerships with Twingate, big data security company, he said, and that gives me everything I need.
Happy to help, Parker.
Love it. All right, well, this has been a great episode, Farokh. That's going to be it for this week's episode of the podcast, Sit and Stay, brought to you by RipsyTech. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd love a rating or review wherever you're listening. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can always email us at sitandstay@ripsytech.com. All right, Farokh, it was great having you. And Tom, I will see you next time.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Parker. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast. Until we meet again, we invite you to sit and stay with the ideas and stories shared today. Dive deeper into how RipsyTech can support your practice by visiting us at RipsyTech.com.